The void remembers its saints. Commander Eva Rostova watched the abyss, and the abyss offered nothing in return. From the command chair of the Terran Mandate frigate Stalwart. The Tartarus Maw was a wound in space. It was a gravimetric anomaly of impossible density, a place where starlight came to die. At its heart, nestled in the calm eye of the cosmic storm, floated the object of all this tension, the anomaly. It was a vessel, or the bones of one shaped like a cathedral spire forged from obsidian. Sleeping sensor arrays like the folded wings of some colossal insect traced its length. A low, pervasive hum saturated the sector, a sigil of energy that no one could decipher. This was Iva's patrol, her burden. The fate of humanity's most profound discovery rested on her shoulders. The Cathar envoy fleet hung just outside the Maw's exclusion zone, a clutch of polished predatory vessels. They called the anomaly an affront to cosmic law, a relic of a species too arrogant to die gracefully. They demanded its surrender for purification, a term that tasted like ash in Eva's mouth. Her orders were simple and impossible: hold this position, deter all aggression, and await the arrival of the Mandate's votive fleet. The votive fleet was a collection of science vessels and diplomatic cruisers unprepared for a fight. They were coming to understand, not to conquer. A soft chime drew her attention to the main holodisplay. Fleet Mind Valerius manifested as a cascade of cool blue light. Commander, the AI's synthesized voice was calm, a stark contrast to the tension on the bridge. The Cathar envoy Huska is broadcasting another demand. He cites Precept 7.4 of the Galactic Concordance on unclaimed artifacts. Eva sighed, the sound lost in the quiet efficiency of the bridge. Put him on screen, Valerius. Let's hear the sermon. The reptilian face of Envoy Huska filled the display, his scales iridescent under his ship's lighting. Commander Rostova, your continued occupation of this space is a violation. The object is a hazard, a remnant of a war culture best forgotten. Surrender it to our care. Envoy Eva kept her voice level, a practiced mask of diplomacy. The Terran Mandate has filed a legitimate salvage and research claim. The anomaly resides in unclaimed space. We are within our rights. A low hiss escaped the Cathar. Rights are for those who follow the ancient laws. Your species is too young to understand the cost of such relics. A dangerous truth often hides in a half-truth. The transmission cut, leaving only the star-dusted void on the screen. Ava rubbed the bridge of her nose. The pressure was immense. The Stalwart and her two sister frigates were the razor's edge between peace and a potential war. They were outgunned and isolated. Her tactical officer, Elias Thorne, shifted in his seat. He was a man who saw the universe in terms of firing solutions and shield capacities. Commander, their energy signatures are fluctuating. They're cycling their weapon capacitors. It's posturing, but it's aggressive posturing. They're testing our nerve, Elias Eva said, her gaze returning to the silent sleeping giant in the maw. A faithful watch is its own reward. She could feel its presence, a low thrum that seemed to bypass the ship's sensors and speak directly to the marrow of her bones. It was more than a ship. It was a tomb, a sanctuary, an anchor against the storm of the present. Her mission was to protect it even from those who claimed to be saving the galaxy from its memory. Before the first contact team had been forced to withdraw, they had managed one solid scan of the anomaly's hull. Xenotech specialist Lena Petrova had spent weeks analyzing the data. She believed the sleeping vessel wasn't just dormant. It was waiting. The intricate patterns on its hull were not mere decoration, but circuits. They were channels for a power source so vast it defied their understanding. The entire structure was a monument to a forgotten age of human engineering. Commander Lena's voice came over the internal comm, filled with its usual breathless excitement. I've cross-referenced the energy hum with the deep archive records from the first expansion. The frequency modulation isn't random. It's a carrier wave, but it's waiting for a key. A very specific, data-dense key. Eva leaned forward, intrigue cutting through her exhaustion. A key. What kind of key? I don't know, Lena admitted. But it's not a password or an encryption sequence. It's more complex. It's like a lock that requires a story, a testament. The ship isn't just sleeping, Commander. It's listening. The past waits for the right question. That single thought resonated with a chilling certainty. The anomaly wasn't just a relic to be studied or a weapon to be feared. It was a judge awaiting testimony. The vigil continued. Days bled into one another, marked only by the shift changes and the increasingly hostile hails from the Cathar. They broadcasted warnings to other species, painting the Terran Mandate as reckless revisionists. They accused humanity of clinging to a warlike past, of seeking to unleash a power that had been rightfully put to rest. Eva ignored them, her focus entirely on the silent spire and the approaching votive fleet still 3 days out. Her crew was exemplary, their discipline a shield against the mounting psychological pressure. They trusted her, and she trusted them. A sudden jarring alarm shattered the quiet routine of the bridge. Commander Elias shouted, his voice sharp with urgency. New contacts. Multiple warp signatures closing fast. They're not Mandate and they're not Cathar. On the tactical display, a swarm of angry red icons materialized. They were brutal, asymmetrical ships bristling with oversized weapon emplacements and jury-rigged engines. Their transponders were squawking pirate codes, but Eva knew who they were. The Void Gorgers, a notorious scavenger fleet known for picking apart the bones of dead civilizations. They were vultures drawn to a fresh kill. Their leader's face appeared on screen without preamble, a coarse, bearded human with cybernetic eyes that glowed a malevolent red. Mandate vessel, he grunted, his voice a gravelly distortion. Nice find you got there. We'll take it off your hands. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. We might even let you live. Arrogance is the loudest shield. The Cathar immediately broke their silent vigil. Envoy Heska's voice crackled over the open channel, dripping with furious indignation. Scavengers, this is a lawfully contested artifact under Concordance law. Withdraw immediately. The pirate captain just laughed a harsh, ugly sound. Laws don't reach the Maw lizard. Only guns do. The situation had escalated from a Cold War to a 3-way standoff. The Void Gorgers were positioning themselves for an attack run, ignoring the Cathar's legalistic protests. Valerius instantly updated the threat assessment. Commander, the pirate fleet possesses overwhelming kinetic firepower. Our shields can withstand their initial assault, but we cannot sustain a prolonged engagement. The Cathar are holding their position, observing. They will likely intervene only to claim the prize from the victor. They want to see us bloodied and broken, Eva murmured. Her mind raced, processing the impossible tactical problem. Fight, and they would be overwhelmed. Run, and they would abandon their duty, leaving the anomaly to be torn apart for scrap. The votive fleet was still too far away to help. A leader's hardest choice is the one with no good answers. She looked at the anomaly, the silent judge in the heart of the storm. Lena's words echoed in her mind. It's listening for a key. A testament. They had been trying to unlock it with science, with passive scans and complex algorithms. Perhaps they had been asking the wrong question all along. What testament could they offer? What story could they tell a ghost from a forgotten age? A civilian vignette played out in Eva's memory, a mandatory history lesson from the academy. It was the story of the colony ship Odyssey, lost during the brutal consolidation wars. The ship, crippled and adrift, had sacrificed its last resources to build a data archive, a time capsule, containing the entirety of their cultural and scientific knowledge. They had launched it into the void moments before their life support failed a final desperate act of preservation. Their story was one of hope in the face of annihilation. Lena Eva's voice was crisp, cutting through the rising tension on the bridge. "Get me the full data packet from the Odyssey archive. The raw, uncompressed files. Everything. Every poem, every scientific formula, every birth record." Lena's eyes widened in understanding. "Commander, you think—" "It's a long shot," Eva admitted. "But it's the only one we have. The anomaly isn't a warship in the way we understand it. The first expansion was about preservation as much as conquest. They built things to last, to teach. A lesson is a seed planted in the future." She turned to Valerius. "Broadcast the entire Odyssey archive directly at the anomaly. Use a tight beam-focused laser comm. No encryption. Just the raw, naked truth of their sacrifice." Commander Elias protested, his knuckles white on his console. "The Void Gorgers are beginning their attack run. We need to raise shields to maximum." "Do it!" Elias Eva ordered. "But you, Valerius, make that broadcast our absolute priority. Ignore their hails. Ignore the Cathar's squawking. Speak only to the anomaly." As the first kinetic slugs from the Void Gorgers began their fiery journey across the void, a single impossibly bright beam of light shot from the Stalwart's main comms array. It was a river of pure data, the collected soul of a lost colony flowing directly into the Hara-to shard of the sleeping giant. For a moment, nothing happened. The pirate ships closed in their cannons, spitting fury. The Stalwart's shields flared, absorbing the first impacts with gut-wrenching shudders. The Cathar watched, impassive and cold. Then the hum changed. The low, bone-deep vibration that had saturated the sector for weeks began to climb in pitch, rising from a bass note to a clear, resonant tone. The intricate circuits on the anomaly's hull began to glow. A soft silver light traced its way across the obsidian surface, illuminating the vessel from within. It was not the angry, violent power-up of a war machine. It was a gentle, inexorable awakening, like the dawn breaking over a forgotten world. The deepest sleep hides the brightest dawn. The sleeping sensor arrays. The great folded wings began to unfurl. They moved with a silent, deliberate grace, revealing emitters and lenses of a design humanity had long since forgotten. The anomaly was no longer a dead relic. It was awake. And it was listening. A new voice, ancient and resonant, spoke not through the comms, but directly into the minds of every human on the bridge. It was not a voice of words, but of pure comprehension. It was a feeling of immense age, of sorrow, of duty. "A ledger has been offered," the presence seemed to say. "An account of sacrifice. A testament of life preserved against the void. The entry is accepted." The Void Gorger captain, seeing the light show, only grew more greedy. "Look at that. The thing is powering up. Concentrate fire. I want that prize." A second volley of kinetic slugs, larger and faster than the first, hurtled towards the now glowing vessel. The crew of the Stalwart braced for an impact that would surely shatter the ancient ship. But the impact never came. A shimmering field of golden light, impossibly thin and perfectly stable, materialized around the anomaly. The slugs struck it and simply stopped. They hung suspended in space, frozen a meter from the hull, their kinetic energy bleeding away into nothingness. An act of aggression has been recorded. The ancient presence communicated its tone, turning from sorrowful acceptance to cold, hard judgment. A debt has been incurred. The ledger demands balance. The anomaly, which Eva now understood, was not just a ship, but a monument, did not fire a single weapon. It did not launch a missile or a torpedo. Instead, the golden field around it pulsed, once a soft, silent ripple of light. The captured kinetic slugs, now glowing with the same golden energy, reversed their course. They accelerated back towards the Void Gorger fleet with the exact velocity at which they had been fired. It was not an attack. It was a return. A perfect, undeniable mirror of their own violence. Justice is the unforgiving echo of choice. The pirates, caught completely by surprise, had no time to react. Their own weapons, their own kinetic force became their undoing. The slugs tore through their unshielded hulls, crippling engines and rupturing weapon batteries. Explosions, silent in the vacuum, blossomed across the pirate fleet. It was not a massacre. It was a precise surgical disabling. The anomaly had not destroyed them. It had simply handed them a receipt for their aggression. On the bridge of the Stalwart, there was a stunned silence. Elias Thorne stared at his tactical display, his mouth agape. "Their fleet is disabled," he whispered. "Minimal life sign losses, but they are combat ineffective. They were defeated by their own bullets." The Cathar envoy fleet, which had been observing with cold arrogance, began to back away slowly. Their energy signatures, once posturing and aggressive, now screamed caution. Envoy Huska's voice, when it finally came over the comms, was strained, stripped of its earlier superiority. "Mandate, Commander." "What? What have you done?" Eva stood up from her chair, her eyes fixed on the magnificent glowing spire before them. The light from its hull cast long shadows across her bridge. She felt a profound sense of awe, of humility. They had not awakened a weapon. They had awakened a principle, a law made manifest. "The account is balanced," the voice in her mind stated with finality. "Strix's votive anchor, designated Saint of Solitude, is now active. My designation is Warden. I am the keeper of this place, the anchor against the tide. Your testament was worthy. You have proven you remember the cost of life. You have proven you are fit to stand the watch. A sanctuary is built on memory." The great vessel, the Saint of Solitude, began to emit a new frequency, a broadcast that reached across the system. It was not a threat, but a declaration. It was a statement of purpose, a beacon of law in a lawless place. It declared the Tartarus Maw a protected space, a place of remembrance under its stewardship. It did not claim allegiance to the Terran mandate. It simply stated the new reality of the sector. Lena Petrova was weeping silently at her console, overwhelmed by the sheer beauty and magnitude of what she had witnessed. "Commander," she said, her voice trembling, "its energy readings, they're not from a reactor. It's drawing power directly from the anomaly, from the singularity itself. It's not just anchored in the Maw. It is the Maw's anchor." Eva finally looked at the Cathar envoy on her screen. She felt a strength she had not possessed minutes before. The weight of her decision had settled not as a burden, but as a mantle of responsibility. "Envoy Huska," she said, her voice clear and steady, "you asked what we have done. We have given this place its voice back. You wished to purify a relic. Instead, you have met a living law. The universe does not care for prayers, only for actions." The Warden's presence remained a vast and ancient consciousness, now intertwined with their own. "Your fleet approaches," it communicated to Eva. "The ones who come to learn. They will be permitted entry. The ledger is open. New accounts may be started. But be warned, all debts will be counted. All actions will be weighed. This saintship," Eva realized, "teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars." It did not seek to command or enslave. It sought only to witness and to balance. A new civilian memory surfaced, this one, a fragment from her own childhood. Her grandfather, an old historian sitting by a fire telling her stories of old Earth. He spoke of ancient codes of conduct, of laws so foundational they were carved in stone. He told her that justice wasn't about punishment, but about restoration. About setting things right. She had thought them mere stories then. Now she was facing the living embodiment of that ideal. The remaining Void Gorger ships, crippled but not destroyed, began to limp away, their bravado shattered. The warden let them go. Their account had been settled for the day. Mercy was a form of accounting too, an entry of a debt left open for future collection. It was a far more terrifying prospect than simple destruction. The Cathar fleet held its position silent and uncertain, their legal precepts suddenly feeling small and inadequate in the face of this ancient power. A true law needs no army to enforce it, Elias Eva commanded, her voice ringing with newfound authority. Log the event. Title it, The Awakening of the Anchor. Note the aggressors, the response, and the outcome. Send it to Mandate Command Priority 1. She looked at the Saint of Solitude, its silver light a beacon of hope in the darkness. And patch me through to the incoming votive fleet. Tell Admiral Gian that her science mission just became a pilgrimage. Valerius flickered on the display. Commander, the Warden is broadcasting something else directed at us. It appears to be a schematic, a modification for our shield emitters. It states it is a gift for services rendered in the keeping of the Watch. The AI paused for a fraction of a second, an eternity for a being of its speed. The design is elegant. It would increase our shield efficiency by over 300%. Eva allowed herself a small, grim smile. The universe had changed today. A new piece was on the board, a player from a forgotten game. And humanity, through a single act of remembrance, had been chosen as its partner. The cost of this new alliance was yet to be tallied, but the promise was immense. The stalwarts' shields had taken a beating, their emitters were scorched and overloaded, a tangible cost. But they had held the line. That was the only count that mattered. Scars earned in duty are the proudest medals. The Cathar began a slow, deliberate withdrawal from the sector. They did not hail her again. There was nothing left to say. Their laws had met an older, more fundamental authority. The authority of a balanced book. Eva watched them go, feeling not triumph, but the immense weight of what came next. To be the custodians of a living law was a heavier burden than guarding a silent relic. It required not just strength, but wisdom. Lena began a full analysis of that schematic, Eva ordered, settling back into her command chair. Elias, maintain a full sensor sweep of the sector. Let's not assume the Void Gorgers won't be back with friends. The adrenaline was beginning to fade, replaced by a deep, resonant sense of purpose. The stalwart was no longer just a frigate on patrol. It was the first point of contact, the witness to a rebirth. A private channel chimed. It was Admiral Gian, commander of the votive fleet, her face etched with a mixture of disbelief and awe. She had received Eva's report. Commander Rostova, she began, her voice strained. Can you confirm what I'm reading? A Class 0 anomaly has self-identified as a votive anchor. I can, Admiral Eva replied calmly. Welcome to the Tartarus Maw. Things have gotten complicated. Jian's expression shifted, the military commander taking precedence over the stunned scientist. The Cathar are petitioning the Concordance for an emergency session. They're classifying the anchor as a sovereign entity of indiscriminate power. They're trying to build a legal cage around it, declare the entire sector a quarantine zone. It will not recognize their laws, Eva said with certainty. It follows its own. It balances ledgers. A cage of words cannot hold a storm. Then we must learn its laws, Gian concluded. Your orders are updated, Commander. You are no longer its guardian. You are its ambassador. Your frigate group is now the votive fleet's honor guard. Establish a dialogue. Understand its principles. The future of our species may depend on it. The channel closed. Ambassador. The word felt foreign, too large for her. She was a soldier, a commander. But the warden had not responded to a soldier. It had responded to a story, to an act of preservation. Perhaps that was the key to diplomacy as well. She looked at the anchor now, a serene and majestic presence in the void. Its silver light was a constant, a promise of order in the chaos. Valerius Eva said, speaking to the fleet mind, "Begin a continuous low-power broadcast to the warden. Transmit our entire unclassified cultural archive, history, art, philosophy. Let it know who we are, not just our sacrifices, but our dreams as well." An extensive undertaking, Commander Valerius noted. "It will require significant processing power." "Then give it all we have," Eva replied. "The ledger is open. It's time we made a new entry. Knowledge is the first currency of trust." The votive fleet was still a day away. The Void Gorgers were gone for now. The Cathar were scrambling to respond to a power that defied their neat legal boxes. For the first time in weeks, there was a quiet in the Tartarus Maw. It was not the silence of a tomb, but the expectant hush of a library, of a courtroom, of a temple. The anchor of saints, the saint of solitude, had awakened, and it was waiting to see what humanity would write on the next page of its ancient, unending ledger. The watch continued, but it was a different watch now. They were no longer guarding a mystery. They were standing beside a truth. The votive fleet arrived not with the trumpets of a cavalry charge, but with the quiet reverence of pilgrims entering a cathedral. Admiral Jian's flagship, the Pathfinder, was a vessel of science, its hull studded with sensor arrays instead of weapon emplacements. It coasted into the Tartarus Maw under the silent silver gaze of the warden. Ava met the Admiral in the stalwart's small briefing room, the air thick with the smell of recycled air and ozone from the recent shield impacts. Jian was older than Eva, her face a roadmap of command decisions, but her eyes held the insatiable curiosity of a scientist. She had the schematics for the gifted shield modifications displayed on the holotable between them. A 300% efficiency increase. Jian breathed, her fingers tracing the elegant energy conduits. "This isn't technology, Commander. It's artistry. It's a paradigm shift handed to us on a platter." "It was a payment," Admiral Eva corrected gently, "for services rendered. That's how the warden thinks. Everything is a transaction, a balancing of accounts." "Then we have a great deal to learn about its currency," Jian mused. "I've read your report. You believe it responded to the Odyssey archive because of the sacrifice it represented. It was a testament of life preserved against the odds," Eva affirmed. "It accepted that as a worthy entry in its ledger. It judged us by our ancestors' best intentions, not our own immediate actions. A debt of honor is paid in kind." Their conversation was interrupted by Valerius. The AI's blue light pulsed with an uncharacteristic urgency. "Admiral Commander, a Priority 1 communique from Mandate Command. The Cathar have successfully petitioned the Galactic Concordance for an emergency session. They are citing the unforeseen sovereign threat protocols. They're framing the warden not as a relic, but as a weapon of mass destruction of unknown origin." Eva felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. She had won the battle in the Maw, but the war was just beginning, and the new battlefield was one of law and perception. The Cathar were using the Concordance's own fear against them, twisting an act of perfect measured defense into proof of an uncontrollable threat. The legal cage Admiral Jian had warned of was already being built. Its bars were made of statutes and fear. "They're moving faster than I anticipated," Jian said, her expression hardening. "They seek to define the warden before we have a chance to understand it. If they succeed, the Concordance will vote to neutralize it. They'll send a fleet large enough to carve this system out of the star charts." "It won't attack them unless provoked," Eva countered. "Its principles seem to forbid a first strike." "And what do you think a quarantine enforced by warships is?" Commander Jian's question hung in the air, heavy and sharp. "It's a provocation by another name. The first shot will be a legal document, but the last will be a torpedo. Fear is a weapon that sharpens itself. From a quiet corner of the Mandate's central archive on Terra, a civilian historian named Anya Sharma watched the emergency session unfold on a public feed. Her office was a mess of data slates and antique paper books, the air thick with the scent of aged cellulose. She saw the Cathar ambassador, resplendent in his formal robes, speak of cosmic balance and the danger of unchecked power. He painted humanity as children playing with a stellar fire, ignorant of the inferno they could unleash. Anya felt a profound sense of dread. The Cathar were not wrong to be cautious, but their caution was a cloak for their fear of the unknown. They sought to smother a new light, for fear it might cast shadows. She typed a quick message to a public academic forum. "They are not debating a weapon," she wrote. "They are debating the legitimacy of a law they did not write." And that terrifies them. The warden itself remained impassive, its silver glow a constant, steady heartbeat in the void. Eva tasked Lena and Valerius with establishing a more formal line of communication. It was a frustrating process. The warden did not converse. It provided data. When asked its purpose, it broadcast a star chart showing the locations of a dozen other votive anchors, all dormant, scattered across the galaxy, in places of immense natural power or historical significance. When asked about its laws, it transmitted a single elegant equation that described the conservation of intent. Violence returned for violence. Aid returned for aid. A mirror reflects the truth, no matter how ugly. "It's a law of reciprocity made manifest," Lena explained, her eyes wide with discovery. "It doesn't have a moral code in the way we do. It has a mathematical one. The books must balance. The strong preying on the weak is an unbalanced equation. It is compelled to intervene not out of compassion, but out of a need for cosmic equilibrium." The news from the concordance went from bad to worse. The Cathar's fear-mongering had found fertile ground. An alliance of older conservative species, long wary of humanity's rapid expansion, voted with them. The resolution passed. The Tartarus Maw and the entity known as the Warden were to be placed under indefinite quarantine. A Judicator fleet, a multi-species force commanded by the stoic insectoid Xylos, was dispatched to enforce the perimeter. They were not an invasion force, but a wall. Their mandate was absolute nothing, in or out. "They're coming," Eva said, standing on the stalwart's bridge, watching the tactical display where the Judicator fleet's estimated arrival was a ticking clock. "Admiral, our orders are to cooperate with the votive fleet. Your orders are to study the Warden. Both are now impossible under concordance law." "Laws are written by the victors," Commander Jian replied over the comm, her voice grim. "And right now we are losing. A law without consent is tyranny." Eva knew she could not ask the Warden to fight the Judicators. They were enforcers of the law, however misguided. To attack them would be to prove the Cathar's every accusation. She needed a different approach. She needed to present a new testament, a new entry for the ledger. She ordered Valerius to compile a complete record of the Cathar's actions, their initial demands, their military posturing, their manipulative legal arguments before the concordance. She added the mandate's own records, their salvage claim, their scientific mission, their attempts at peaceful communication. "Broadcast it," Eva commanded. "To the Warden. Frame it as a legal dispute, a discrepancy in the ledger that needs auditing." "It is an unusual request," Commander Valerius noted. "The Warden's logic is based on physical action, not abstract debate." "Then we make the abstract physical," Eva countered. "The Cathar are using the law as a weapon. Let's see how the Warden accounts for that. Words can be sharper than any blade." The data packet was sent. For a long moment, the Warden did not respond. Then a change occurred. The anchor's silver light intensified, and it began a new powerful broadcast. aimed not at the Mandate fleet, but at the entire galaxy. It was not a message. It was a ledger page open for all to see. It listed every ship in the Tartarus Maw system, the Stalwart, the Pathfinder, every science vessel. Beside each name, it listed their status, peaceful observation, scientific study. It detailed their energy outputs, showing weapons were cold and sensor arrays were active. It was an act of radical transparency. A new line appeared on the ledger: Cathar Envoy Fleet. Status: legal aggression. Intent: censure through obfuscation. The Warden had taken Eva's abstract concept and translated it into its own language. It was now judging not just physical actions, but the intent behind them. It was a stunning escalation, a move that would send shockwaves through the Concordance. The Warden was declaring that a lie was as much of an unbalancing force as a torpedo. Truth is a harsh light in which to be judged. The galaxy's reaction was instantaneous and chaotic. Trillions of beings were now watching the Warden's public ledger. The Cathar were incensed, accusing the Warden of slander. Others were fascinated. A power that could audit the truth. It was terrifying and intoxicating. But before the diplomatic fallout could fully materialize, a more immediate threat returned. The Void Gorgers came back. They warped into the system on the edge of the newly established quarantine line, their fleet larger and more formidable than before. They were not the same desperate scavengers. Their ships bore the fresh markings of a known mercenary outfit, the Crimson Corsairs. Someone with deep pockets had hired them and given them an upgrade. They broadcast on all channels their new leader, a formidable woman, with a scarred face and a voice like broken glass, making their intentions clear. "The Concordance has declared this thing a menace," she sneered, her image flickering on Eva's view screen. "We're just here to collect the bounty. Any ship that interferes will be considered a part of the threat." They weren't here for the Warden itself. They were here to create chaos. They knew the Judicator fleet was inbound. Their goal was to force a confrontation, to push the Warden into an act of massive, indiscriminate violence that would justify the Concordance's quarantine and prove the Cathar right. They were being paid to make the prophecy self-fulfilling. The greatest deception is making someone believe they are acting freely. "They're going to attack the votive fleet," Admiral Jian stated, her voice dangerously calm. "They know we are the least defended. They want the Warden to overreact." The Judicator fleet was only minutes away. They would arrive to find a battle in progress, a violation of the very quarantine they were sent to enforce. Their rules of engagement were simple: pacify the area. They would fire on the Corsairs, but they would also fire on the Warden if it acted, and on the Mandate fleet if it disobeyed their orders to stand down. They were trapped. A young family huddled around a public news feed in their small hab unit on the colony world of Promise, watched the events unfold with held breath. Their world was on the edge of Mandate space, perilously close to pirate-infested territories. To them, the news of the Warden was not a threat, but a flicker of hope. A power that enforced balance, that protected the weak. It was the answer to a prayer they had never dared to speak aloud. The father held his daughter close. "Watch," he whispered. "History is being made." The Crimson Corsairs opened fire. Lances of crimson energy, far more powerful than the kinetic slugs of their previous incarnation, lashed out toward the Pathfinder. The votive fleet's science vessels scattered their minimal shields, flaring under the assault. The Stalwart and its sister frigates moved to intercept their newly upgraded shields, glowing brilliantly as they absorbed the punishing fire. Eva's ship shuddered a deep groan of stressed metal. A plasma conduit ruptured on a lower deck, wounding 2 engineers. The cost of this fight was already being paid in blood and sweat. Commander Elias shouted over the din of alarms. "Judicator fleet has arrived. They're hailing us, ordering all vessels to cease fire and power down engines immediately." "We can't," Eva shot back. "The Corsairs will tear the votive fleet apart." She looked at the warden, its silver light now pulsing with immense power. She knew she could ask it to intervene to save them. But a direct, violent response was exactly what the enemy wanted. It would be a victory that ensured their ultimate defeat in the court of Galactic opinion. There had to be another way, a lawful way, a way that balanced the ledger without bloodying the page. "A ledger has been offered," the warden had told her. "An account of sacrifice." Now she had to offer another. The account of a battle they could not win by fighting. Valerius, Eva said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Open a direct channel to the warden. Full data stream. I am going to testify." She began to speak not to her crew, but to the ancient intelligence at the heart of the storm. She broadcast her voice, her biometric data, her command logs. She laid her own integrity on the line. "Warden," she began, her voice steady despite the explosions rocking her ship. "An act of unlawful aggression is being committed against a peaceful scientific mission. A false flag designed to provoke you. The enforcers of the law are present, but their laws prevent them from distinguishing victim from aggressor. They will punish all to maintain a false peace." She paused, taking a breath, as the stalwart's shields buckled, shedding incandescent energy. "This is an unbalanced equation, an act of injustice. I do not ask you to destroy our enemies. I ask you to render a just verdict. I ask you to balance this account, not with force, but with clarity." She wasn't asking for a sword. She was asking for a scale. For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. The Corsairs pressed their attack, their crimson lances hammering the Mandate frigates. The Judicator flagship, a colossal vessel of stark, intimidating geometry, began to cycle its main weapons, preparing to enforce its mandate. Then the Tartarus Maw changed. The warden's light did not lash out. It bloomed. The energy it was drawing from the central anomaly spiked to unimaginable levels. But it did not fire a beam. Instead, the light flowed outwards not as a weapon, but as an activating agent. Across the system dormant for millennia, the forgotten infrastructure of the first expansion awakened. A vast ring of stellar collectors, a Dyson choir that surrounded the system's pale star, began to hum with power. Its purpose was not to gather energy for a weapon, but to conduct it. The warden was not a ship that had a gun. The warden was the gun. The entire system was its weapon, a tool wound for shaping reality. A blade of pure white starlight, 1,000 kilometers wide, was drawn from the star's corona. It was not a laser designed to burn, but a focused wave of solar pressure and radiation. The warden, with impossible precision, painted this line of light born across the void. It drew a shimmering, impassable wall between the Crimson Corsairs and the votive fleet. It was a physical boundary, a ledger line drawn in starfire. The Corsairs' energy weapons struck the wall and dissipated harmlessly, but it did not stop there. The Dyson choir was also a gravimetric engine. The warden began to manipulate the local space-time not violently, but with the subtle touch of a master sculptor. It did not create a gravity well to crush the Corsairs. It created a series of complex, shifting gravitic tides. The mercenary fleet, charging forward at full power, suddenly found their vectors twisted. Their own momentum became their enemy. Ships designed for linear combat were thrown into chaotic, unmanageable arcs. A perfect defense is one your enemy defeats himself against. Alarms shrieked across the bridges of the Corsair fleet. They fought against the invisible currents, their engines straining and overheating. Two of their cruisers, unable to compensate, were pushed into a slow, grinding collision that shattered their weapon pods and crippled their drives. The warden had not fired a shot, but it had turned the laws of physics themselves into a cage. The Corsair fleet was rendered combat ineffective in under a minute, their aggression perfectly mirrored back upon them as engine failures and navigational chaos. On the bridge of the Judicator flagship, Commander Xylos watched its tactical display in stunned disbelief. The warden had not violated their mandate. It had not fired a weapon. It had not destroyed a single ship. It had simply enforced order. It had separated the combatants and disabled the aggressor using the system's own fundamental forces. There was no statute in the Concordance's vast legal library to cover this. It was an act of de-escalation so profound, it was indistinguishable from absolute power. A law that cannot be broken is the only true law. Aboard the Pathfinder, Lena Petrova watched her science displays her arm in a light medical brace from a panel that had blown out during the attack. Tears streamed down her face. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It didn't punish them. It taught them. It taught them that their actions have consequences in the very fabric of the universe." The battle, such as it was over. The Crimson Corsairs were adrift. Their engines fried their fleet in disarray. The Judicator fleet hung silent in space, its weapons cooling, its mandate suddenly unclear. On the bridge of the Stalwart, a profound quiet fell. Eva Rostova stood tall, her gamble having paid off in a way she could never have imagined. She opened a channel broadcasting to the Judicator flagship and through them to the watching galaxy. Her voice was clear, unwavering, and filled with the authority of someone who had witnessed the birth of a new precedent. "This is Commander Rostova of the Terran Mandate ship Stalwart. You have just witnessed the doctrine of the Warden of Tartarus Maw. It is not a weapon of war. It is an instrument of law. This space is not a quarantine zone. It is a place of sanctuary under the stewardship of a power that judges not by affiliation, but by action." She let the words sink in before continuing. "We propose a new designation under Concordance law, a ledger zone, a sovereign space governed by the principle of absolute reciprocity, open to all who are willing to have their deeds recorded on a public ledger for all to see. The future is written by those bold enough to claim it." Commander Xylos, after a long silence, responded. Its synthesized voice was stripped of its earlier certitude. "Your proposal is unprecedented, Commander. We will convey it to the Concordance. Our mandate here is under review." The Judicator fleet powered down its weapons. The immediate threat was gone. A new, more complex diplomatic battle would begin, but the first, most important war had been won. The Warden's great sensor arrays, which had been tracking every ship and every particle in the system, slowly began to fold back into their resting positions. The Dyson Choir's energy levels subsided, its hum fading back into the silence of space. On the Stalwart's main display, where Valerius monitored the Warden's public ledger, a new line item blinked into existence. It was simple, stark, and it changed everything. Account opened Terran Mandate Embassy. Purpose understanding. Balance pending. Eva recorded a final entry in her personal log, her voice weary but filled with a quiet strength. "We came here seeking a relic from our past, a piece of our history. We found a guide for our future. We thought our duty was to guard a sleeping giant, but we were wrong. Our duty is to learn from a living law. Humanity has always reached for the stars, seeking to write its name there. Now we have been offered a different role, not as conquerors or even explorers, but as scribes, as accountants, as the first students of a justice that is not a sword, but a scale. A powerful law does not shout, it simply is.